ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ትችላላችሁ።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ ጥያቄና መልስ የክፍል ስራዎች ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁት አይነት በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ ከናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
Let's start from where we have stopped. I think you can understand me that way. I can see Kazala and maybe one person. So today we will see. I can share you the screen. What we can see is the fifth chapter, instruments applied in foreign economic policy, the micro tools, nacho. So let me share you that. I hope you can see it now. So in this fifth chapter, what we will try to see is the tools, the instruments that can be applied in foreign economic policy. Remember, our course is foreign policy making and analysis. And then one of the biggest issues in foreign policy making is issues related to economic policy or economic matters. We try to see some microeconomic tools that can be applied by governments last week, I mean on previous Tuesday. Today we'll see what are the instruments applied in economic policy. So these tools can be classified into two major groups, the macro tools and the micro tools. So these are the two major issues that we will discuss in this chapter. The remaining issues are already being provided in the form of exams like that. So let's see it first about macroeconomic instruments. Which macroeconomic instruments? Let me ask you this question. What do you think is the essence of, when you say the essence means like the concept or the nature of macroeconomic policy? I know you are international economic students, so you are not naive or you are not new for this concept, but for the sake of curiosity and then even conceptualization of what we are really talking. When say macroeconomic policy, it deals with the influence of the state on the economy as a whole. What will be the influence of government on the economy as a whole? In particular, let's say on national income, it can be even on the aggregate consumption, it can be on investments, on saving, the effect of governments on revenues and expenditure of the state generally budget on the balance of payments, on even on trade balance, and then the effect of government on the economy through the supply and demand of money. We call it the monetary policy, and then even others like the employment, unemployment issues. So it's macroeconomic policies. It is a very big, broader issue that really tells us the influence of the state on the economy as a whole. So this is one that. Therefore, macroeconomic policy, the macroeconomic policy, as you know, it from other subjects. It covers like income policy, can have price policy, fiscal policy, monetary policy, credit policy, and many other policies in this regard. But these are the major ones, the 6 or 7 are the major pillars, the pillars of macroeconomic policy. So macroeconomic policy normally provides serious attention towards the stimulation of economic growth. One of the focus of the macroeconomic policy is the stimulation of economic growth through the aggregate effects of government intervention on these particular matters. Second, its primary attention is limiting inflation, and then, if possible, eliminating unemployment, if not at least minimizing unemployment, even balancing the state budgets, state budgetary deficits. State budgets, it means the amount of revenue that the state generates and the amount of expense, we call it state expenditure, that the country really allocates to various capital and the other thing is even counter disequilibrium, especially in terms of correcting balance of payment problems. Yeah, especially in the balance of current accounts. Generally, macroeconomic policy is featured or characterized by a general or a comprehensive influence on the behavior. It's on the behavior of economic subjects. The economic subjects means it provides a fertile ground or a phenomena both to be desirable and undesirable from the point of view of the state. Which issues could be desirable and which issues could be undesirable would be the concept that people can really understand by analyzing this topic, okay? So remember, our topic or our concept, our issue here is what? Macroeconomic instruments. What are the macroeconomic? We defined what's macroeconomy and the relationship with the economy and the policy that we are really dealing with, international foreign policy. So macroeconomic policy normally allocates efforts, or the policy, the one that can implement the macroeconomic policy of the country, it has somehow a direct or indirect impact on economic relations, okay? You can see the scope from this figure, the scope regarding the influence of macroeconomic policy on economic relations, let's say abroad. Assume these are the, you can have this, the open economy, the partially open economy. Normally, we can have these types of economy when related in terms of our the level of openness of that economy. A given economy totally maybe closed economy. But these days it's very difficult to be a closed economy. But the approach to close, some main restrictions may be there. Some sentences on the policy of a given country that can really show this is open, but when you check it, normally it's not open. So in practice, it's closed means. There are some partial open economies and then it's still open economies. So we have a macroeconomic policy. We see the macroeconomic policy, the foreign economic policy, and scope on the influence of macroeconomic policy on economic relations abroad. You can see that. So in the open economy, the interface between macroeconomic policy, which is the one these drawn downwards, with the foreign economic policy. Normally the macroeconomic policy is designed in the context of what's the domestic economy. Indirectly or directly, of course, it will have an effect on foreign economic policy. During an open economic policy, there may be some balanced sense, there is somehow a uniform understanding. I can say that somehow a balanced effect on foreign economic policy. If it is an open economy, the macroeconomic policy uniformly affects the foreign economic relation. So the scope of the influence of macroeconomic policy somehow it will affect on all sectors wise or even temporal wise. In partially open economic policy, we have macroeconomic policy, of course, we can have foreign economic policy. Our macroeconomic policy is drawn downwards, our foreign economic policy is drawn horizontally. Partially open means it is only on some minor interfaces that the macroeconomic policy cuts or relates or interfaces with foreign economic policy. It means, what does it mean? There are some sectors in the macroeconomic, there are some sectors, some issues in the foreign economic policy that may not be addressed by the macroeconomic policy, or there are some macroeconomic policies that may not have an interface with certain economic policy. But still, of course, there are some areas where the macroeconomic policy and the foreign economic policy, they may interface. So we have to deal very much on this regard. And the surprising thing is that it's very difficult to identify this point of departure. Where is the limit? You know, that's somehow. In case of closed economic policies, the macroeconomic policy and the foreign economic policies, they never touch each other. So it's closed, and whenever it is there a need to really do something with other country, it will not be in the form of policy, but in the form of some temporal relations. So anyway, I tried my level best to show you the scope of the influence of macroeconomic policy on economic relations abroad. We can have a number of examples on this if you are really interested, you can. Why do you think are the macroeconomic instruments that can be employed in a foreign economic policy? What do you think, what do you think are the different macro, I didn't say micro, which I have discussed last time, the microeconomic instruments. What do you think are the key macroeconomic instruments? Those instruments that have a holistic influence on the overall performance of the economy in the domestic market, let's say domestically, as well as it has an influence on foreign economic relations or foreign economic policy. I hope if definitely you know them, if I simply list them and then in detail you can really broad them. So I'm sure, I know, and I really count on you, you can list on this, okay? I'm sure you are reading it, the material that I am giving you. So the first one is the exchange rate policy, the ERP. The exchange rate policy is one of the most influential policy interventions, but macroeconomic policy interventions that can affect the foreign economic policies that can be applied on this economy. So one of the instruments in foreign economic policy under the macroeconomic instrument is the exchange rate policy. The other thing is the interest rate policy, even the monetary policy, the fiscal policy, income policy, budget policy. These are the six powerful macroeconomic instruments that can be applied by states to influence their foreign economic policy. Okay? I'm sure if I ask you this one by one, you can really understand that what's ERP, what's interest rate policy, what's monetary policy, you are in this department. So just for making things easier, what do you think are the micro? Let's talk about the micro issues. The microeconomic instruments. Can you mention them? Yeah, we already discussed them last time. Tariff, sometimes you call them custom duties, para-tariff, half tariff, sometimes pure tariff line original, and then even non-tariff instruments. We can have a number of cases where we can apply in foreign economic policy. These three are called the micro, but micro we have discussed last time. today we'll focus only on this one, this chapter. So the first one is exchange rate policy. I hope you can see the role that national banks are really playing. So exchange rate is an instrument of macroeconomic policy. It makes the nation to be powerful enough to influence both economic relations So the exchange rate, how it can really influence the economy, I think it's very clear for you. One is through the mechanisms that you call it the devaluation, the revaluation, the issues of depreciation, appreciation, all these things they can really contribute on that. And then definitely through the exchange rate systems, the country can have that much influence. When we talk about the exchange rate systems, there are two types of systems. I hope you know it from your international relations, I mean from your remaining subjects. We can have a steep system, and then I think you want a power ችግር አለ መሰለኝ እዚህ ሰፈር, and then even the floating exchange rate system. Related to the interest rate policy, it's just to encourage or discourage issues related to investment, and that can be seen from the point of view of the borrower and the lender, and the role how banks can play can be a very important point of intervention. So interest rate is a relation normally that exists between the charge paid for using one's own capital, and then definitely that's what we call it the price. The price for capital is interest rate, and sometimes countries have their own way of devaluating that price to, let's say, to encourage investment. And then if investment may not be that much important, they may encourage saving. So to encourage savings, the interest rate may increase. All this, they can have direct or indirect impact on the foreign economic activities. Monetary policy, as you know it, as a measure of value, money matters, is that not? For instance, its means of circulation, the way how that money is paid, means of payment, and means of accumulation reserves. Existence of money normally facilitates the process of exchange. Like that process of exchange also includes what? Payment for international traded goods. That's what we call it international exchange. So it can have its own effect on various commodities, and the example will be clear if you see it from on commodity basis or like that. What will happen, for example? What will happen to the nations that are really trading together if there is no money, without money? Normally, from history of trade, we can see that without money, the scale of exchange is somehow very smaller, because without trade, without money, trade is very difficult, and then even if there is trade, that can be kind of bartering. So the scale of the exchange would be much smaller, and it can also cost even higher, because commodity በሚኖርበት ጊዜ ከፍተኛ የሆነ የvalue chain cost አለው። Okay, even what will happen to production, what will happen to the marketing related activities, and the role of money plays, and then the distance of banks. You can remember, for example, somebody who is in Ethiopia, if she or he wants to buy something from Germany, the trust between the two persons very, very difficult if there is no bank. So banks can also play a role. If and only if, yeah, money exists. Yeah, you can really see this. Other thing is fiscal policy. Let me show you, or let me minimize it like this. Fiscal policy is really shaping the state. The state in terms of taxation rules, and then ultimately affecting what? Affecting income and expenditure. Mainly this fiscal is something related to taxation. So when you talk about taxes, taxes can have direct taxes, we can have direct taxes or indirect taxes. When you say direct taxes, these taxes are normally levied on individual incomes, like you and me, if you are already employed, as well as even incomes from enterprises. Whereas indirect taxes are also instruments to change both the structure and size of consumer and investment demand. So they are really levied on indirect tax. I hope you can understand them all this. So these are some of them. Budget policy, government can influence. It is foreign economic policy in terms of budget. Budget is nothing that is the one that can try to show or balance between government revenue and government expenditure. For instance, if government requires huge revenue, definitely has to do something related to taxation and controlling of some activities. So that's why. So when we talk about budgets, we are talking about budget expenditure, and on that side we can have issue of subsidization and like that, to maximize social welfare, like that. Even budget revenue, like collecting from personal income tax and from the different taxes like that. So governments can influence its international economic relations through budget policy. Remember, budget is something domestic. It's a macroeconomic issue, but directly or indirectly affects what? Directly or indirectly affects the country's foreign economic policy. So far we have seen the macro level instruments. The second category that I have seen even last time is the microeconomic instruments. ባለፈው በደንብ አይተናል። እዚህ ላይ ምንም ጊዜያችሁን ማጥፋት አልፈልግም። ካሪኩለም ላይ ስላለ ወደ almost I gave you 90 something PowerPoint or slides. You have to read that, but I can really do something here. The classification of microeconomic instruments. These microeconomic instruments, these are the three major categories, the tariff related. We call them custom duties, the para-tariff, and the non-tariff. Tariff instruments or custom duties, no badam baitanol ballafo. I think except Bini, I think all of you have attended that. I hope he can also read in the cover with us. To summarize work. Customs individual commodities like part by partition, like ad valorem tariff or ad valorem duties in the Mibalu. This is something new that I want to deliver today as the end of our class. So when we want to classify custom duties, it's very difficult, by the way. Some books, they suggest 3 ways of classifying custom duties. Others suggest like 5 ways. But for me, there are 6 ways of classifying custom duties. The question is, how can we really classify custom duties? The first, we can classify custom duties based on the way how we settle the duties. Second, we can classify custom duties based on the direction of the movement of goods. Third, we can classify custom duties based on the function of the duties. The fourth one, we can classify custom duties based on the level of the duties. What does mean level? Of course, it is somehow argumentative, we will see that. And the fifth way of classifying custom duties is the way how we are treating partners in that exchange or in that transaction. And the sixth one, and the simplest one, is we can classify the duties based on ways of decision making. So I try to present you some summarized picture here. This is the classification. I hope you can understand me. So based on the ways, the way of settling duties, here you can get these 6 ways: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. For example, based on the first one, based on the ways of settling duties, can have custom duties. One ways we can really consider on the value of the item. We call it the ad valorem tariff. Or we can consider on the quantity to be customized or to be taxed. And the third one, we may consider both of them up to this percentage volume, like 15% import tax. But if you import beyond this volume, maybe you can say like 40% tax. Like a very good example on settling this combined or on value and on quantity tariff is Denmark is a very good example of this. Before some of the commodities are arriving, let's say from Brazil or Colombia to the port in Copenhagen, they will decide on this. The second way of classifying custom duties is classification according to the movement of goods, of course. Movement of goods in international economic relation could be what? That could maybe for import, the movement may include export, or sometimes it can be like kind of transit. So we can classify imports on these 3 bases, okay? The third way of classifying custom duties is based on the function of the duties. What is the function of that restriction, that trade restriction? That trade restriction may be purely physical, kind of generating income, let's say. The government may be taxed to collect some source of income. To protect domestic banks or markets, and then not to disturb the capital market, so interest rate guys. The other possible duty of custom is protection. Yeah, we don't want to do anything with fiscal, but for protecting domestic market or domestic economy from abroad, we can really apply that duty, and the function of that duty is protectionist policy or protectionist duty. The other is we can classify custom duties on the levels, on the degree, on the intensity of application. We can have the minimum and maximum. When it is minimum, normally we can really way of treating partners preferential. The other is discriminatory. Even discriminatory, it can have what? Like compensatory ሊሆን ይችላል dumping በጣም ዓለም እያስቸገረ ስለሚሆን like anti dumping policy ሊሆን ይችላል ወይም retort ሊሆን ይችላል but based on this we can have some decisions autonomic and contractual decisions so we can classify things like this para tariff like tariff and tariff ባለፈው ያየነው ነው like governments can have quotas and other things I hope that will be enough on the 5th chapter I think it will be enough even for today I will send you the slide you can read I hope you are doing your assignment by the coming Tuesday we will finish the course probably after Tuesday maybe on the day after if you prefer 1 day or 2 days you can present your cases you will submit for me just the materials you tried I will tell you of course I will consider the time you have and then you can also present the PowerPoint okay that way we can consider today since there was serious power interruption I came to one of my colleagues' office and still 2 of my colleagues are in front of me before they didn't come. Now they are here. So I don't want to bother you more than this. I appreciate my friends who really host me today. If you have any question, suggestion or comment, you are most welcome. I see, I think Kadus is there. Maybe Bini is there. Question, comment, suggestion, you are most welcome, please. ጥያቄ ካለ ተመስገን ይታየኛል ጥያቄ ካለ
የለኝም ዶክተር ቆንጆ ነው ሌክቸር
ዛሬ መብራት አስቸገረኝ እኮ
በጣም አስቸጋሪ ነው እኛም ተቸጋግረናል
ዝናቡ እየጣሰ ነበር አንዴ ካንዱ ቢሮ ሄድኩኝ የሚገርም
ያስቸግራል ዛሬ ትንሽ ጥሩ አይደለም
በቃ ስላይድ ልክላችኋለሁ አንብቡ
እሺ
ማክሰኞ እንገናኝ
እሺ thank you ዶክተር
thank you
እናመሰግናለን ዶክተር
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ MBA በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት MBA በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ MBA በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ MBA በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ MSc በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።